"Sir, that boy lived with me in the orphanage," the cleaning lady cried out when she saw his portrait. The framed photograph slipped from the director's trembling hands and hit the edge of the wooden table, leaving a faint crack on the glass, almost echoing the crack forming inside his chest. The room felt cold, the air unusually heavy, as if the truth hidden for years had suddenly clawed its way back to the surface. Outside, the children's laughter drifted through the open window, unaware that the life of one of their own was about to unravel in ways no one expected. In that single moment, every buried memory, every secret sacrifice, and every unanswered question began to rise like dust disturbed after decades. And it all started with that one line from the cleaning lady, a line that changed everything. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to KNH Stories to support meaningful storytelling. The cleaning lady, Khadija, had worked at the Hillview Orphanage for almost 25 years. She had seen countless children arrive with broken hearts and leave with new hopes stitched into their fragile souls. But she remembered every single face, especially the ones who carried pain silently. And the boy in the photograph, the one now being honored in the newspaper for a heroic act, was one she could never forget. His name was Ian. A child who had walked into the orphanage holding nothing but a torn blanket and a haunted look in his eyes. Even after all these years, the memory of that night returned to her vividly. Cold, rain-soaked, shivering, unable to speak for an hour, as if he feared the world would collapse again if he opened his mouth. Ian grew up differently than the other children. He was quieter, more observant, the type of child who sat near the window during storms, watching the rain fall as though it carried pieces of a past only he understood. He rarely cried, even when he was hurt. Instead, he would clench his small fists, swallow the pain, and force a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The staff often whispered that he was too mature for his age, that life had shown him far more than it should have. Still, he remained kind. He helped serve food to the younger kids, cleaned the study hall without being asked, and stayed awake at night when anyone was sick, placing wet cloths on their foreheads with the tenderness of someone who knew what it meant to suffer alone. Years passed, but the orphanage, struggling with limited funding and poor conditions, could do little to give the children the future they deserved. The walls grew older, the resources thinner, and the loneliness heavier. Ian noticed it all. He noticed the cracked ceilings, the broken lights, the staff exhausted from trying to stretch what they had. More than once, he overheard conversations about shutting the place down. And that planted a seed inside him, a fierce determination that one day, he would change everything. One day, he would return. But fate had its own plans. At 16, Ian was adopted by a humble couple from another city. They were good people, gentle, hard-working, and patient. But adjusting to a new life was not easy for him. He missed the familiar dullness of the orphanage walls, the cold winter nights shared with the other kids, and most of all, he missed Khadija, who was the closest thing he had ever known to a mother. He carried the orphanage within him like a shadow, always with him, always reminding him of where he came from. Life did not get easier, but Ian kept pushing. He studied harder than everyone else, believing that the only thing powerful enough to change his destiny was effort. He worked part-time jobs, saved every rupee he could, and lived with a constant sense of responsibility. By the time he was 27, he had built a reputable small business and started funding minor projects for orphan children across the region. But even then, his heart never forgot the place where he grew up. The story that landed his photograph in the newspaper was one of courage. A fire had broken out in a government building, trapping 2 children inside. People panicked, authorities were late, and the fire spread quickly. Without hesitation, Ian rushed into the burning structure, ignoring the flames licking at the walls, ignoring the smoke suffocating his lungs. All he saw were those small hands reaching out for help. He carried both children out, collapsing moments later. The picture in the newspaper captured him mid-rescue, face smeared with soot, eyes fierce with determination, hands holding the children as though he would never let them fall. When the orphanage director received the newspaper, he brought it to his office to show the staff. That's when Khadija saw it. Her cry was not of shock, it was of recognition, of pain, of a mother's love for a child she had lost long ago to adoption but kept alive in her prayers. The orphanage called him immediately. 3 days later, Ayan arrived, stepping through the same old gate that had framed his childhood. The building was older than he remembered. The paint was peeling, the benches were cracked, and the swings in the playground creaked with the wind. Yet, it still smelled like home, like warm bread, old cupboards, and memories soaked into the walls. But he wasn't prepared for the moment he saw Khadija. She stood with trembling hands, eyes brimming with tears, her old shawl wrapped around her thin shoulders. Time had carved wrinkles on her face, but her eyes held the same warmth that once soothed all his fears. He hugged her for the first time in more than a decade, and something inside him finally broke. Years of held-back tears, silent struggles, sleepless nights, and unanswered prayers melted all at once. For the first time since childhood, he cried openly, head bowed against the shoulder that had once comforted him. Khadija wiped his tears with the same tenderness she had used when he was a lonely 7-year-old boy sitting on the orphanage stairs. Walking through the orphanage, Ayan saw everything with new eyes. The thin mattresses, the broken shelves, the worn-out textbooks, the children eating simple meals with quiet acceptance. He felt a familiar ache, the ache of knowing what it felt like to grow up with little and dream of much. He knew he had to do something. Something bigger than charity. Something that would last. Over the next few months, Ayan devoted himself to restoring the orphanage. He invested his earnings, reached out to donors, organized charity events, and gave speeches about the importance of caring for vulnerable children. Slowly, the orphanage transformed. New classrooms were built. The playground was renovated. Children received proper bedding, fresh uniforms, warm meals, and scholarships. The walls were painted in bright colors that brought life and joy to the place. And through all this, Khadija watched him with pride so deep it softened every wrinkle on her face. But Ayan didn't stop there. He established a foundation in the orphanage's name to ensure long-term stability. He created a mentorship program, taught older kids skills that would help them build careers, and spent countless evenings talking with them about dreams, fears, and futures. He became the example he once needed, proof that a child from nowhere could become someone who mattered. Years later, when reporters visited to cover the transformation of Hillview Orphanage, they asked him why he invested so much into this place. He simply said that this was where he learned what pain felt like, what hope tasted like, and what love, simple, unconditional love, looked like. And he owed his life to the woman who had once held his trembling hands and told him he was not alone. If this story has touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to KNH Stories so we can keep spreading light and humanity through our storytelling. Before we end, please take a moment to comment your thoughts. Even a single heart emoji means a lot. Ayan's journey from a broken child to a savior of many proved that sometimes, the most wounded souls become the greatest healers. And sometimes, the people who appear ordinary, like an aging cleaning lady with kind eyes, are the ones who save lives quietly, silently, beautifully. In the end, the orphanage did not just become a sanctuary for abandoned children. It became a living testament to resilience, kindness, and the miraculous power of second chances. And every child who walked through its gates now carried a part of Ayan's story with them, a story that began with loss but ended with hope.